All right, so today I am here with Marty Rowan from Highpoint Church. Marty is the student and family pastor at Highpoint, and so he oversees all things birth through 18 years old for all seven of their locations. So, super excited to have you on here today, Marty. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, like what called you into ministry, and how did you find your way to Highpoint?
Yeah. Chris, thanks for having me, man. It's a huge privilege and opportunity. I'm really thankful for it. So after school in Grand Rapids, I got picked up by a small church in Grant, Michigan, which is a small rural like farming community, which is the opposite of what I grew up like being a part of. I grew up going to larger churches in the Chicagoland area. And so they reached out to me. They said, "Hey, we need a youth pastor." And I was like, all right, like I like working with students. And so I came on and I was like very like out of sorts, kind of coming into that context of, again, being like labeled as kind of a city kid in a rural context. But I loved working with kids and students. And shortly after my time there of being there, they said, "Hey, we think you kind of got a knack for writing curriculum and doing some other things. Would you want to kind of come on as the associate pastor?" And so after a couple months there, I came on as the associate pastor. After about 2 years of doing that, they had some leadership changes, a couple different things. And so my family is out again in the Chicagoland area. So in about 2017, I came on staff at Highpoint Church. So they're looking for a high school pastor. And so I came on as the high school pastor. Shortly after that, they asked me to be the family pastor. So there's 3 locations at the time. As you said, we're a 7 campus church now and oversee birth through 18. And I love it. It's honestly, working with kids and students is an absolute riot. And a big reason I ended up kind of going into that path was I got asked to serve up at a camp. And they were just like, "Hey, can you come as a leader, work with junior high students?" And I was like, "No, that sounds terrible. Like 6th graders, they like smell, they're rowdy." And
Mhm.
honestly, I was their cabin leader. I got to like, talk to a kid about his family, his faith. He ended up deciding to follow Jesus. I got to pray with him. And I kind of got this glimpse into like, I was like, man, if I could do this like for the rest of my life, like if I get to see what like heaven sees when someone gets like, follow Jesus, I don't want to do anything else in my life. Like this is it. Like there's nothing else that I'm going to find more fulfillment, more joy in than watching people come to know Jesus. Like he's done a work in my heart. I want to see him do a work in other people's hearts. And so that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm in ministry. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, that is awesome to hear there, Marty. I love that. Love that story there, and a couple threads to pull on. So it's very awesome that you were able to kind of like test drive the ministry career almost before, jump in, full throttle in there.
Yeah.
So camps are great. Are what other like ways would you recommend people kind of test drive a career in ministry before going
Yeah.
all in?
Yeah. That's a great question. Honestly, like I'm a huge believer in internships. Anytime I've ever had an intern, I always said it like the first meeting I have with the intern is I have one goal. I want you by the end of this internship to know 100% you should be pursuing ministry or 100% you should not be pursuing ministry. Like that's it. That's the only goal. So many people I think like wander in. They're like, I don't know. Like I liked like, my church growing up, or I felt affirmed here. And so I'm pursuing it, but I don't really know. And like Chris is like, ministry's hard. Like there are seasons where it is like, it is difficult. And I think you have to kind of draw from that well of your past experience and remembering those moments where it's like, oh man, this season where it's like this or this relationship. And I think if you don't have like that, like well, or like that, you're not called, that sense of like, I've been called to ministry, it's easy to like quit and like, just like, I'm out. And so I think
Mm.
internships is a huge thing to be like, all right, we're going to move some chairs. We're going to run some cables. We're going to work on some devos, some content. You're going to preach or whatever it is.
Mm.
Because again, I think a lot of times churches really, really maximize those internships, and you kind of get that opportunity to test drive what it would look like. And so internships is huge. Camps are huge. And I think too, just like ask to just like shadow for like a day, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm.
I think there's a lot of people who are like, Marty, your job is you just get coffee with people. And it's like,
Yeah.
I wish, and there's aspects of that for sure. But a lot of it
Mhm.
is like, dude, I write a lot of content. I oversee a staff team, and there's things that I think a lot of times people miss when they show up, Wednesday nights or Sunday nights to youth group, or, Sunday to church. They're just like, you just get to hang out. You're like, no, no, not exactly.
Absolutely. Well, those are all some great tips, and I really like that idea of like shadowing, volunteering, interning.
Mhm.
Because there's so many different ways you can, and you'll get like a real experience too, like you
Oh
mentioned.
yeah.
Like there's more than what meets the eye to everything going
Hmm.
on here, and really, really important. Like you mentioned, ministry does get hard at times.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a very strong, I believe, very strong foundation to be sure as to why you are going in this path. Because obviously, like you can still believe without working in a church, but
100%.
choosing to be called into ministry and work in a church is definitely something where there can be moments that are trying. So when you encounter some of those moments, what are some things you like, mantras you remind yourself of, like important things to kind of, see those moments through?
Yeah. Um, my first internship was at a church, and I remember the youth pastor told me, he's like, hey, we do student ministries in the worship center, and it sat about 200 people, and they were like the heavy chairs. I'm talking about, like the ones like the illuminate, like these weren't like the
Uh-huh.
light chairs, and we had to like I had to take them all apart because they snapped together. Each
Hmm.
Wednesday, it took me about an hour and a half to
Oh,
take them
wow.
off, stack them, and I just remember being like, dude, ministry is moving chairs. And off this idea of like, dude, Jesus came to serve. Like Jesus washed his disciples' feet. And I think like
Mm.
coming out of like the this like growing up in the kind of that mega church era, um, I think a lot of times, like sometimes leaders are perceived as having this pedestal. It's like, man, what does it look like in my context for me to serve the church? Like, does that mean I
Mhm.
show up early and move the chairs so the leaders can be the relational people having that time rather than like, and again, different contexts, different things. I'm not like, you know, but I was just like, man, I want to serve so leaders can bond with students and with kids. And I want to give them that opportunity to minister. And so that means I'll wrap the cables. Like I'm not above doing anything. Like I've done it all. Like, and so I think when you tell people, it's like, dude, serving is awesome. And of course, like, sure, some people get microphones, some don't. But at the end of the day, every piece of it's vital. Every piece.
Mhm.
Like if you're running slides, if you're, leading worship, if you're preaching, if you're moving chairs, you're pulling the trash, it's all got to play together, or else it doesn't matter. And so I think this idea of like Jesus coming to serve, and there's days, when you're stacking chairs. Even now, I'll stack some chairs and I'll be like, Jesus came to serve, man. And that's what all I'm gonna do. Minister this context, love on them, move some chairs.
Absolutely. I mean, I do relate there with the chairs in particular. At our church growing up, there was this one room that'd be used for events, and the
Yep.
chairs were, I don't even know if they were aluminum, they were just heavy.
Yeah. Oh
And they'd
yeah.
all like Lego stacked together.
Yep.
So you'd have to like pick up a stack, and yeah,
Yep.
it's not that
Yeah.
fun.
That's the stack of sticks with the rolly cart. And
Yeah.
like, yep. Yep.
Oh, I
Everyone's been
didn't
there.
have a cart. I just like
Oh, you
throw
just
my
muscled
back
it.
out. Yeah, absolutely. So
That's awesome.
awesome. Well, yeah, definitely. I wonder how many other people listening to this have moved chairs at their church. Probably most of
Yeah, most of
them.
them. They're like, yeah,
Definitely more have than haven't for sure.
yeah.
Um,
You get to avoid your gym membership for a while, though. You get to slow that down. The less chairs you move, you got to step it up. But
pretty
yeah,
much, pretty much. There's unforeseen fitness benefits there.
exactly.
Awesome. All cheers aside, those are some, very, very exciting, tips that are notable. Like, hey, Jesus watched his disciples' feet, and you might say, well, that's Jesus, but like, there are lots of examples. Like, hey,
Yeah,
Marty moved chairs. Like Walt Disney would pick up trash in
yeah,
Disney World.
yeah.
It's like, okay, if Walt Disney has time to do that, like you can do unglamorous
Right.
stuff.
Oh, dude,
Uh,
for sure. It's the gospel. Like
Absolutely.
like when you're in ministry, like everything's the gospel. Like you're not running games for the sake of running games. It's the gospel. Like
Mhm.
planning center, it's all of it's leading to the moment where it's like, are kids going to experience Jesus? And like the answer should be yes. And if it's not, then you probably should look at your program. But
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. And I mean, that is always good to keep in mind. One thing a lot of our partners mentioned helps when things are difficult is like, hey, keep in mind this is about having kids come to and experience Jesus. That
yeah.
is what you're doing. And there's really like not a lot of things that would really slow you down when you think of it from
Right.
that perspective. It's like,
Right.
am I going to let these chairs stop me from helping people come to Jesus?
100%. Yeah.
Like,
No.
absolutely not, no
Remove
matter
all
how much the
obstacles.
chairs
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, and then on that note, that's a great segue to the next question I had there, Marty, which was, when it comes to having kids experience Jesus and stuff, what are some things that you found work really well at High Point since you've gone from 3 campuses when you joined to 7 now? What are some of the activities that you found are like most engaging for kids, both like in person and at home, that you have utilized to just get the most engagement, see the most joy and learning in the kids' eye?
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. So since my time, we've done a couple different models. We've done junior high and high school separate. We've done them together. We've done home groups where high school meets in homes. Junior high kind of came out of I worked out of the church. And so right now we're doing junior high and high school combined at all of our locations. And we're working through the book of Matthew, like verse by verse till we're done. And I don't know. I wish I could say it'll be done by spring. I don't think it will be, but and the reason is it all kind of came from a conversation last spring with a student who came in, and she said it was her first time, and I went up to her afterwards and just said, hey, like I wanted to introduce myself, like super glad you're here at our Naperville campus. And she said, I'm really glad I came. This is a place where I found truth. And it like hit me in a different way. It unlocked some things in my head where I'm like, man, students and kids are in this kind of post-truth world where like they're watching the news and they're like, I don't know what to believe. Like, what about this? This person said this. And more they're looking for something to stand on. And specifically where we do ministry, like it's, if kids want to go have fun, there's a million things they can do. And I think there's spaces for that. And I think there's spaces for like them to hang out. There's not a lot of spaces for them to like come and be taught how to read scripture, how to apply to their lives. And I was like, man, this is it. Like, obviously, like I think everyone's heart as a pastor and like, is obviously like teach the Bible, but I think there's this bigger piece of it. It's like, man, if we can get kids to approach the Bible with confidence and like to see it clearly for like what it is, and that the Bible can radically transform your life and give you like a platform to stand on. So you can be like, oh, this is how, like giving you them like a lens to see the world. I was like, if we can teach that, I was like, we're serving kids well. Because I think at the end of the day, kids and students remember 2 things. They remember the really big things. Like they remember like the, 300-foot inflatable obstacle course where there's ice cream and the 30-foot bonfire. And then they remember like the really, really like personal things, or their small group leader like pulled them aside, prayed with them, or like whatever. And that's it. Like a lot of other stuff gets like kind of lost in the mix. Like I'd be like, Chris, how many messages do you remember from junior high? You could probably do like 1 or 2, but like, you're like, oh, I remember when this leader, talked to me about what was going on at home, or like, I remember this huge event. And I'm like, dude, let's put all of our chips on those 2 things, like huge things, and creating spaces for leaders to have like intimate moments with people. And so we do. That's how we function. That's how we like run all of our stuff for kids and students. Is that mindset. If it doesn't fit in there, we don't do it. Like just straight up. If it doesn't fit, don't do it.
Absolutely. That is a lot to take away there, from that there, Marty, because
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like, I really can only remember like 2 or 3, services,
Right.
from junior high, but lots of moments, when the folks leading those ministries talk to me personally, and obviously remember all the, cool things and, big things that happened. So really like that idea of kind of looking through the lens of, hey, how much of an impact is this going to make on this person's future?
Yeah.
Like when they are, 10, 20 years later, like what are they still going to look back and be able to remember? So that is outstanding. And I don't think that's how most leaders think about it. At least maybe not like that explicitly, like, hey, we want to focus on these high impact activities. And yeah, that is very awesome, and definitely innovative to like take that stance to that, and really funnel your organization to making sure you're only focusing on those activities. And
Yeah.
with that said, like I know that can be kind of complicated to get like everyone on board with stuff like that. What are some key values you and the rest of the team at High Point use to kind of operate by?
Yeah. We have a lot of different values and different things that we like hold to. One of the reasons I came on staff, one of them is we run hard. And
Okay.
I love that. Like, I love the idea of, I want to come alongside people who, again, I was radically transformed by the gospel, and I want to destroy every obstacle to let other people experience, the same Jesus, of the Bible. And that's one of the big ones that I've kind of taken away here. But more specifically in our team's context, kind of going back to that, like the big things and little things, is I don't know how the Chili's are in Indiana, but there are some
Okay.
Chili's restaurants out here in the suburbs of Chicago that are not good. There's not good.
Okay.
And it's, you may love Chili's, and if you do, I'm sorry. But I said, I don't want to be Chili's. Like that's a lot of, there's this piece of it of like, they kind of appeal to what people want, where they're like, oh, we do a little bit of like Tex-Mex. We do a little bit of like, we do breakfast food. We do like you got to pick a lane, you got like, I don't care if you serve sushi, burgers, like steak, whatever you do it well and do it under the Lord, And so one of the things that we always say in the family department is like, yo, is this Chili's? Like, is this a kind of like a middle of the road? Like, who are you appealing to? And we don't want to do that. And so no Chili's. And that's a huge one. And then we also, one of the big ones too, that comes to mind is the best idea wins. Like when we sit around a table, when we're like the team's in the room, we want God to be honored above all things. And so, but we also are like, there's a little bit of humility when you work on a team to be like, my idea may not be the best idea. And like, when we leave that room, it's not this person's idea or this person's idea or my idea, it's the team's idea. And I think that kind of creates a level of unity where it's like, all right, no matter, we're going to talk openly and candidly about things that are good, things that are bad. We're going to evaluate. And when we come with ideas, it's the team's idea. And so that way it doesn't become like an awkward like race of who's, nobody's got time for that. It's all for the Lord.
Absolutely. Well, really, really like those values there. So one of our core values at Playlister is idea meritocracy. So
Yes.
Synonymous with the best idea thing, because it can be hard as a leader sometimes to open the floor up so that everyone truly does feel, comfortable presenting ideas, because, a great book on that is Creativity Inc. is where we stole that from. The Pixar.
Ed Catmull. Yes.
Absolutely. So you talk about I think you called it the brain trust, where they basically just like idea meritocracy,
Chapter 5.
Absolutely. So awesome to see you've read that as well.
Yes.
Great book on the idea meritocracy there. And then Chili's. So they are good in rural Indiana. I have not I haven't seen a Chili's or been to one in the metro Indianapolis area.
Okay.
But where I grew up in rural Indiana, they were good, in the Chipotle chicken and waffles were really good.
Oh man. Okay. I've not had that. So maybe I'll have to give Chili's another shot, but I just had just a streak of bad Chili's runs. And so I'm just like, man, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if there's space for it, but no offense, Chili's.
I love the value though, regardless of anyone's stance on Chili's in particular. But hey, if you think of the best restaurants you've been to, none of them are Chili's. Like they're all, hey, this is an Italian restaurant that's good.
Yes.
This is a sushi bar that's good. Taco restaurant.
Yes. You're preaching right now, Chris. Let's go. That's
absolutely. So yeah, love that value of, hey, we are, being what we specialize here, just bringing people to the gospel. And so that is outstanding as well. And kind of another segue into the next question, which is, what are some of your like short term, as in like next, hey, like 6 to 12 months, and then kind of like long term ministry goals?
That's another great question. I am currently, I'm not passionate. I would go past it. I'm like haunted by creating inclusive spaces for young people.
Mhm.
We are in a weird context of doing ministry where only 30% of the students who attend Highpoint students call Highpoint their home. And then
Okay.
about 60% of our students are a part of a church in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
So that means about 40% of the students who are attending are not connected with the church in any way, shape, or form, which is awesome. Like it
Oh yeah.
is huge. It's super cool. But at the same time, it creates a very weird dynamic where we have students who grew up in our church, and we also have students who literally have never like held the Bible before. And
Mhm.
so but it's like, I think it's going more and more complex as ministry has gone. Even in my time here at Highpoint, I'm seeing the complexity of students with like gender identity and
Mhm.
like complicated home lives and like just all the things that I think we're facing as adults, kids are experiencing, but we have like adult brains to like work
Mhm.
through them. You know what I'm saying? Like COVID, I think did a number on many adults, like just the whole social piece. But kids are experiencing that same thing. Students are experiencing the same thing, but they're like, what does this mean for me? Like, how do I function in a world where like these things are celebrated or not celebrated or talked about or not talked about? And I think there's just the church can always carry stigma, some good, some bad. And
Mhm.
so I'm haunted by creating a space where students can come and feel welcome no matter what's going on at home. And the reality is that Jesus meets them where they're at. And
Mhm.
um, I think more kids are coming in with more walls than they ever have. I think more kids are coming in with more walls than they ever have. And it's like, how do we let them know that this is a place that they are seen, they're loved by God, they're loved by their leaders, they're loved by the pastors and the staff. And
Mhm.
we want to minister to them. And no one is too far from Jesus. Like, and that I say that all the time to the kids who come through. It's like, I all the time will have students come in with like AirPods and they'll be checked out. And you'll be like, hey, come on, join us. And they're like, no. They'll sit through like the message or the small group and they're just like checked out. And dude, you just never know the seeds that are being planted, and I think sometimes like I have a lot of new leaders this year in particular, and they're like, I'm not seeing fruit, not seeing fruit. I'm like,
Yeah.
you won't for probably like 3 years and maybe longer. But like you just never know how God's working through that. Just be faithful and God's going to do the rest. I don't change hearts. My team doesn't change hearts. Like pastors, like the Lord changes hearts. And I think that actually alleviates a lot of pressure for like pastors and ministry leaders of like, dude, I'm just gonna be faithful. Like I'm gonna be faithful to the word, faithful to the community that God's given me to like be amongst and to lead. And when you think about it, that's like God's gonna change hearts. I just gotta be faithful. That like takes all the pressure off in a good way.
Oh yeah.
It's like, man, God's doing a work. I just gotta let him do it and be faithful.
Indeed, and a lot to take away from that there, Marty, and absolutely agree. I was talking with another one of our partners, like I think a month or two ago, and he mentioned that like when he was younger, he was kind of interning slash volunteering in some kind of inner city ministries, and he was kind of a mentor to a lot of young boys in those environments. And
Yeah.
he said that now, when he is 15 years later, an adult, all settled down and everything, he actually was friended by one of the boys who's an adult now on Facebook.
Yeah.
And he's mentioned that, hey, you're the reason why I decided to follow Jesus. And
Mhm.
he's, had great improvement in his, life situation since then. And it's like, hey, that's 15 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
You're not going to maybe see a result
Right. Right.
immediately. It's like, hey, this person, I got him to come to church. So now, everything's going to change.
Right.
Like it's going to take time, but think of it kind of like the book The Score Takes Care of Itself,
Mhm.
which was the 49ers coach just giving like, hey, we're going to practice a standard of excellence here. We're
Yeah.
going to check the boxes we came here to check, do our best job, and the end result is going to take care of itself
Yep. Yep.
regardless. So love
So
that
good.
there. And then like building the like inclusive environments for folks. I saw like a New York Times article mentioning like churches are critical just for the community aspect.
Yeah.
I know some of our partners mentioned that they have belong before they believe
Yeah.
like services. It's like
Yeah.
great thing there, because like thinking of what you can do beyond just like, hey, the core mission of the church is to bring people to Jesus, but
Mhm.
churches throughout all of history have been historical centers of community, and that's what
Right.
you can still do even to people that are unchurched per
Yep.
se.
Yeah.
They can find community there, and you can bring them to Jesus over time.
So good. Yeah, I love you said that, because like our churches, like we believe, belong, become. Like that's what we that's it right there. That's the vision of our church. And so, but this whole year, I like when we had our meeting with all of our kids and student leaders, I said, we're still like believe, belong, become, but this year we're gonna put belong before believe, because I think that's where our
Mm.
community is at. Like, and it's
Mhm.
okay that we're gonna have some kids and students who are coming in from different contexts, different backgrounds. And honestly, like Jesus meets the physical needs, like almost always before the spiritual needs, so we see him healing people, and then it's like, and there's this piece of it of like, man, like, are we just gonna, again, gospel, we believe in that, we teach it, we all that stuff, but it's like, are we meeting people's physical needs? Like, is this a space where they feel welcome, cared for, heard, seen? And it's like, often that's the receptiveness, like they need that before they can hear the gospel. And so, and obviously that's why we like people do games, and that's why like there's food, and like, because it's like, oh, these people are
Mhm.
normal and functional, like maybe they actually have something here that I should listen to or be a part of. And dude, that's so good.
Absolutely, and it is good to think like from that perspective of putting belong first in those three steps there, because like why if you're like, hey, from an unchurched perspective, like, hey, do you care about me, like I'm
Right.
here,
Right. Right.
why should I immediately give into like whatever you're talking about
Hmm.
and pay attention to that if you haven't
Yeah.
acknowledged like my needs as a human being that's under your
Yeah.
church here. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah. So
lots
good.
of great perspective on that there, Marty. And so like closing question was kind of hey, what are some other just like broad advice that you have for leaders in ministry?
Yeah. um on top of just being faithful, I think it's really easy to look over the fence and compare, like, oh, this church is doing this or this, like, and I think there's a piece of it of like, be faithful to your context. Like, there's things churches
Mm.
are doing in the area and like around the US, around the world. They're like, oh man, if we had this would be amazing. And you're like, that's maybe not what your students need. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Mhm.
mean, sure, again, you've talked to people, all over the country who are doing different things. And like, what works on the West Coast probably will not work in the Midwest. What works in the Midwest probably won't work on the East Coast. And that's okay.
Mm.
And even honestly, city to city, it's like, what are these guys doing? Like, what? And you're like, dude, what do your students need? What do your kids need? What's the felt need? What's the spiritual need? And meet that,
Mhm.
rather than being like, oh, we gotta do whatever, fill in the blank. You know all the things that people can kind of fall in the trap of. And um, I just think more and more and more we're seeing people want real relationships, real conversations. They want to see eye contact. They want to, and digital obviously is never going away. Obviously, like we're pro digital, but
Uh-huh.
not to replace real. You know what I'm saying? By like real, I mean like face to
Mhm.
face ministry. Um, and I think keeping both in like one in each hand, not throwing one away for the other, either way.
Mhm.
Um, but all things are a tool. And so how are we using those to glorify God in the midst of our ministries?
Absolutely. Well, could not agree more there, Marty. So thank you so much for sharing so much today. Lots of awesome insights to share with playlister partners. And yeah, that sounds like some awesome things are underway at High Point. So definitely, if you are listening to this in the Illinois area, kind of near where High Point's campuses are, check it out, because it sounds like an awesome, environment you've built up there. And so really excited to see how things continue to go. And thank you again so much for being on here and sharing advice.
Thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. Playlisters changed the game for us. So we're just super thankful to get to know you and the team. And so appreciate you guys a ton.
Awesome. Well, always happy to help. Perfect.
Love it.